For 50 years, there was one verdict everybody in Formula One agreed on. America doesn't work. Too European, too expensive, too slow for a country raised on ovals. They literally ran the pinnacle of motorsport in a casino car park once. Twice, actually. The one time America built its own team, the thing never even turned a lap. F1 was something the United States hosted in nervous little bursts, and then lost. Again, and again, and again. But then, everything flipped, and today, the same country is one of the biggest bets on the sport's entire future. So how on earth did that happen? Today, we're going to find out. There was a token American presence right at the start. The Indy 500 actually counted towards the World Championship from 1950 to 1960, which is a weird bit of trivia most fans don't know. Then came the first proper street and road rounds. Sebring in 1959, where Bruce McLaren won in front of about 7,000 people, and Riverside in 1960. Both one-offs, both lost money. Then finally, a home, Watkins Glen, host of the United States Grand Prix from 1961 to 1980. And the Glen mattered. For 2 decades, it gave F1 the one thing it never had over there. A date on the calendar people could count on, in a place that actually loved the racing. And then it collapsed. Not strategically, financially. By the late 1970s, the circuit was falling apart, and the organisers had run up debts they couldn't pay. The sport pulled the race after the Glen failed to settle the money it owed the teams, roughly $800,000, and the track went bankrupt soon after. F1 looked at the wreckage of Watkins Glen and drew exactly the wrong lesson. The right lesson was patience. You build an American home the way you build any home, slowly, by keeping your word. Instead, the sport went chasing the magic shortcut, over and over and over. And the list of disasters that followed is genuinely hard to believe. Start with Long Beach, which ran from 1976 to 1983 and actually worked. It was the closest thing America ever had to its own Monaco, a proper glamour street race on the Pacific. And then it walked away. The promoter, Chris Pook, fell out with Bernie Ecclestone over money and took his race to the American Kart Series instead. The one venue that had genuinely cracked it. Gone over a contract dispute. Then Detroit, 1982 to 1988. 7 races on a bumpy, claustrophobic street circuit downtown. It lasted longer than most, then drifted off too. But the one you have to hear about is Dallas, 1984. Because Dallas is where this whole era's madness gets concentrated into a single afternoon.
As far as the circuit's concerned, I think you're going to find it's the finest closed circuit that you'll find anywhere.
A group of Texan businessmen wanted a Monaco of their own, so they built a temporary circuit around Fair Park, and this is the killer detail. They scheduled it for the 8th of July, the middle of a Texas summer. On race day, the air temperature was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the track surface hit something like 140. The freshly laid asphalt couldn't take it. It started breaking up in Friday practice. Then the organisers let a Can-Am support race run on the Saturday, which shredded the surface even worse, and crews spent the entire night patching it with quick-dry cement. The first batch of cement failed. They had to do it again, working right up until 30 minutes before the start. The Sunday warm-up was cancelled because they were still repairing the track. The drivers were furious. Niki Lauda and Alain Prost tried to organise a straight-up boycott. It was reigning champion Keke Rosberg who basically told them to stop whinging. We've come all this way, the fans are here, we race. The race itself was carnage. The walls were so close and the surface so broken that drivers kept clipping the barriers. Ayrton Senna retired blaming what he called a moving wall. And he was right. A barrier had genuinely been shunted out of position by an earlier crash. Cockpit temperatures hit 55, 60 degrees.
Only 8 of the 26 starters were even classified as finishers. Rosberg won it using a water-cooled skull cap rigged up under his helmet, and afterwards called the surface disgustingly bad, the worst I've ever seen anywhere, and his own victory a question of survival. And the defining image of the whole weekend? Nigel Mansell. He'd led from pole for more than half the race. His gearbox failed on the final lap, and he climbed out and tried to physically push his Lotus over the line before collapsing from heat exhaustion on the track just short of the finish. F1 never went back to Dallas. Oh, and the promoter, a real estate developer called Don Walker? He was later investigated by the FBI and the SEC for allegedly misappropriating the Grand Prix's money to fund a $6 million mansion, a yacht, and a collection of 40-odd exotic cars. One local headline summed it up: Grand Prix, Grand Scam, Grand Jury.
Very tough on the equipment because we used to get a lot of wheel spin because you were driving so much on the lower gears with so much horsepower.
And then there's Las Vegas. The first time. 1981 and 1982. The Caesars Palace Grand Prix. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. A World Championship title decider held in the actual parking lot of the Caesars Palace Hotel. The track was reportedly sketched out on the back of a placemat, and they invited cab drivers to drive round it to break in the asphalt. It had 14 turns, ran counterclockwise, which wrenched the driver's neck so badly it got its own nickname, Las Vegas Neck, and it was widely considered one of the worst circuits F1 has ever visited. When Nelson Piquet clinched the 1981 title there by finishing 5th, it took him 15 minutes to recover from heat exhaustion, and he needed a 90-minute massage from Sugar Ray Leonard's masseur to sort his back out. There's even a story that Bernie Ecclestone settled a gambling debt in town by handing over a paper bag full of $100 bills. The 1982 race drew under 30,000 people, the smallest F1 crowd of the entire year. F1 bailed after just 2 years of a 4-year deal. And finally, Phoenix, 1989 to 1991. A downtown street race in the desert, run in midsummer heat the first year, then shifted to spring to try and save it. Senna won the last 2, and the attendance was so catastrophic that the 1991 race was, per Sports Illustrated, outdrawn handily by bird races at the nearby Chandler Ostrich Festival. By the early 1990s, the pattern was overwhelming. Every American solution rotted into a workaround. A belief hardened inside the sport. America was both irresistible and unreliable. Too big to ignore, too slippery to hold. Even the comeback borrowed someone else's prestige.
It's a case that maybe the product doesn't fit into a way TV in America works.
From 2000 to 2007, the US Grand Prix lived at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Instant credibility, one of the most famous racetracks on Earth. If F1 couldn't make it work at Indy, where could it? And then came 2005, the single most humiliating afternoon in the sport's history. And it's worth slowing down for, because it's almost too stupid to be true. That season, there were 2 tyre suppliers, Michelin and Bridgestone, and a rule that each driver had to use 1 set of tyres for the whole race. In Friday practice, Ralf Schumacher's left rear Michelin failed at the banked turn 13 and put him hard into the wall. A big enough shunt that he went to hospital. Michelin then did the maths and realised its tyres, on the freshly diamond ground and unusually abrasive surface, were only safe for about 10 laps. The race was 73 laps. That, to put it mildly, was a problem. So began a frantic scramble. Michelin asked to fly in different tyres. The FIA said no, against the rules. Michelin asked for a chicane to be built at turn 13 to slow the cars down. 9 of the 10 teams agreed to it. The Speedway boss agreed to it. The only team that refused was Ferrari, whose boss, Jean Todt, didn't even bother turning up to the crisis meeting, taking the line that it was a problem for Michelin and the FIA, not him. And FIA President Max Mosley dug in and refused the chicane on safety grounds. So here's what the 100,000 plus people in the grandstands actually got. All 20 cars rolled off on the formation lap. Then, at the end of it, the 14 cars on Michelin tyres peeled straight into the pit lane and parked, leaving 6 cars, the 3 Bridgestone teams, Ferrari, Jordan and Minardi, to race. The crowd, who'd been told this was the absolute pinnacle of motorsport, sat and watched 6 cars circulate. They booed, they threw beer cans and bottles onto the track. Michael Schumacher won what turned out to be his only victory of the entire season. The next morning, the Indianapolis Star ran the headline, "Hey F1, don't let the door hit you on the way out." Michelin later had to buy 20,000 tickets for the following year's race just to apologise. F1 left Indianapolis after 2007 and didn't come back to the US for 5 years. And if the failed races were institutional embarrassments, the next one was personal.
I think it was all a question of time. We were ready to go, in effect, in the sense that we had our backer, we knew what we were going to do, we felt we had everything in place in March '09.
In 2009, 2 men, engineer Ken Anderson and journalist turned manager Peter Windsor, announced an American Formula One team. USF1, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. They'd pitched the FIA a clever idea. A lean, low-budget team running on something like $40 million a year, and the FIA, desperate to break the power of the big-spending manufacturer teams, basically built a whole set of regulations around the concept and waved them in for 2010. This was meant to answer the oldest criticism of all, that America only ever hosted the sport, never lived inside it as a competitor. Instead, it collapsed, almost on contact. They started talking about running 2 American drivers, then quietly walked that back and signed the Argentine Jose Maria Pichito Lopez instead, conditional on him bringing $8 million. Their primary investor, YouTube co-founder Chad Hurley, pulled his money. They couldn't even afford the Cosworth engine bill. The car, built on antiquated technology, was nowhere near ready. By February, they were begging the FIA to let them skip the first 4 races and start later, then to defer their entry to 2011 entirely. The FIA's technical delegate, Charlie Whiting, came and inspected the factory and concluded the team was not capable of competing. Staff openly blamed Anderson's micromanagement for the delays. The team never turned a single competitive lap, and the FIA fined them and barred them from F1 for good. And here's the salt in the wound. 6 years later, Gene Haas did almost exactly what USF1 promised, built an American team and pulled it off. So it was always possible. USF1 just couldn't do it. By the way, even Austin, the one that finally stuck, nearly ended before it even got started. Construction on the Circuit of the Americas got hit with a stop work order in 2011 over a funding dispute, and the race only survived once the political fights got sorted. When it finally debuted in 2012, 117,429 people turned up on race day. But that triumph hides how close it came to being just another tombstone. America didn't wake up one morning and fall in love with Formula One. The turn that actually saved it started somewhere nobody in the paddock was looking.
That was the best day of my life. Ripping around Daytona like a bald eagle. It's flat out, avoided a wreck, which was awesome. Zigged instead of zagged when I should have zagged, and I zigged, and bam! Blew the front end right off my hot rod.
Now, the lazy version of this story is that NASCAR collapsed and F1 simply took its place. It didn't. NASCAR is still enormous. It dwarfs F1 in raw American scale, even now. But by the late 2010s, something subtler was happening inside its own fan base. The flashpoint was the playoff format. NASCAR brought in a chase in 2004 and turned it into a brutal elimination system from 2014. Drivers knocked out in rounds, the title decided in a single winner-takes-all final race. It was openly engineered to manufacture Game 7 drama on demand.
And a lot of hardcore fans hated it, because it could hand the championship to a driver who'd been worse all year. It got tangled up in genuine race manipulation scandals too, cars deliberately spinning to gain the playoff cutoff. And the grumbling got so loud that in January 2026, NASCAR caved completely. It scrapped the elimination format, brought back a points-based chase, killed the win-in-your-in gimmick and the points resets, and even bumped the points for a win from 40 to 55. And the cars told the same story. NASCAR's next-gen car was supposed to modernize everything, and instead, it got slated for how it raced on short tracks and road courses, the exact places fans wanted door-to-door combat, and for a worrying habit of flipping into the air. Ryan Preece went airborne at the 2025 Daytona 500, the 7th such flip for the car, and NASCAR had to mandate a new safety flap for 2026 to try and keep them on the ground. Besides that, NASCAR's age was starting to show. Its 2025 Cup Series TV viewership fell 14% in a single year. The Brickyard 400, once a monster that pulled crowds north of 250,000 to Indianapolis, cratered to an estimated 35,000 by 2017. And when Amazon's Prime aired its first Cup race in 2025, it pulled a younger crowd than NASCAR's usual TV audience, which sounds like good news, until you hear the number. Average viewer age? 55.8. That was the young one. And the thing that shoved it all through the door was a change of ownership and a Netflix show.
He gave him a title that hopefully respects what he's been to the business as chairman emeritus.
In early 2017, the American group Liberty Media completed an $8 billion takeover of Formula One, buying it from the private equity firm CVC. Out went Bernie Ecclestone, who'd run the sport for 40 years. He was handed the title Chairman Emeritus, a role he later admitted he'd never even heard of, and which came with no actual power. In came a Hollywood and TV crowd. And here's the detail that tells you everything. Before Liberty arrived, Formula One had no marketing department. None. Ecclestone had said in 2014 that there was no point chasing younger fans because they couldn't afford the sponsors' watches. That was the mindset Liberty inherited and tore up. One of their new executives, Sean Bratches, pitched a behind-the-scenes Netflix documentary to humanize the drivers. The result was Drive to Survive, which landed in March 2019, and it was an act of translation. And here's a great irony. The two biggest teams, Mercedes and Ferrari, refused to take part in the first season. So the producers were forced to build the show around the midfield, and accidentally turned people like Daniel Ricciardo and the Haas boss Gunther Steiner into the breakout stars, which is a huge part of why the show worked at all. The numbers it produced were staggering. Nielsen surveyed 46,000 fans across 37 markets and found that 1 in 4 of them, a full quarter, became F1 followers after watching the show. A quarter of the fan base recruited by a documentary. That's impressive. But you know what would be genuinely impressive? This channel getting to 50,000 subscribers. So if you're enjoying this video, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. It helps the channel more than you'd think. By 2025, F1's global fan base had hit around 827 million, up 12% in a year, with the American fan base up roughly 11% to 52 million. The US broadcast deal, which moved to ESPN in 2018, climbed from an average of 554,000 viewers a race to about 1.3 million by 2025, a 135% jump. Attendance went vertical, Austin pulling over 400,000 a weekend, and the contracts got enormous. Miami and Austria are now signed through 2041, Canada and Monaco to 2035, Austin to 2034. This was no longer a nervous sport, testing whether America wanted it. It was placing its biggest bets on the exact country that had spent 50 years avoiding it. But the real change wasn't the size of the audience, it was the kind. By 2025, somewhere between 42 and 43% of F1's fan base was under 35, and 42% was female, up from 37% in 2018 and pushing close to 50% female among Gen Z. And the money followed. Total F1 sponsorship is on track to pass $3 billion in 2026, and crucially, the new sponsors weren't tires and oil and engineering anymore. They were banks, crypto firms, tech giants, and luxury houses. And nowhere made that thesis clearer, or showed its cost more brutally, than the return to Las Vegas in 2023. This time, F1 didn't just rent a venue. It bought the land, built a permanent multi-$100 million pit complex, and ran the whole event itself. The race, the hospitality, the street closures, the content machine, all fused into one product. The total bill came in around $560 million. It was a statement about what F1 thought its American future could be. So here's where the war stands. The question America argued about for 50 years, whether F1 can actually work here, is over. Answered. And not narrowly. Answered with 2 Grand Prix, a third on the Strip, contracts running into the 2040s, a fan base younger and more female and more valuable than the sport ever had, and TV numbers that would have been pure fantasy back in 2007 when F1 slunk out of Indianapolis with nowhere to go. The foothold America could never keep is now load-bearing. The war is won. So what do you reckon? Will American management of F1 protect the racing at the centre of it, or let it become the most beautiful party in the world that just happens to have cars in the background? I actually think they would, because otherwise they will just get another NASCAR disaster. Drop your take in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.